Oh, here I am, I'm back. I hope you guys enjoyed the last videos. This is again a little bit on the fly as we've been doing them, but as long as I have the time, I want to get this one out because it's a very important Go show. Again, I'm not lecturing on this Go show. I'm sharing this Go show with you. I'm going to read it. I'm going to express how I perceive it. I can tell you that on first reading, the manner in which I read this and what I got out of it and thought it was saying is completely different than today, okay? And part of that is that to completely understand what this is saying, you have to perceive the reality of your own Buddha nature, okay? Which means that you are now the Buddha if you perceive your own Buddha nature. It's not a hit and miss kind of a thing. So, this is another very important Go show that there are really no lectures written on. It's heavier than shit, I think. I think it's one of the coolest writings of Nichiren Daishonin. As usual, it's to Sairenbo. And since it touches on a couple of things that we discussed in the last video to Sairenbo on prayer, I wanted to continue this because this is, again, further back up to what's conveyed in the opening of the eyes and the object of devotion for observing the mind. Okay, his two most important writings. So this is, I'm not sure if this is in the top 10. I don't believe it actually is, because it's not so much about doctrine. It's a conversation with Sairenbo about his enlightenment that Daishonin's conveying to Sairenbo, his understanding. So it's less of a debate kind of format. It's more like, hey, can you understand what the hell I'm saying? If so, that's really cool. That's what we're going to try and do. We're just going to try to understand what the entity of the mystic law, composed by Nichiren on page 417 of volume 1 of the writings of Nichiren Daishonin, what it actually just says, and it'll probably take a couple of videos to get done. We'll break this one at 1 hour. So I'm going to go back to the background. Then there's also a cover letter that's at the end of the Go show. I'm going to read the cover letter since it's a cover letter. It's sort of an introductory or supplemental point, and then I'll begin reading the Go show, which starts on 417. So if I jump ahead to 431, the background, it says, from the cover letter, which I'll read next, from the cover letter, it is clear that this treatise was addressed to Sairenbo, one of the Nichiren Daishonin's followers. However, it does not bear the date or the name of the place where it was written. One view is that it was authored in the 10th year of Bunei, 1273, at Ichinosawa on Sado Island when the Daishonin was in exile. Sairenbo was a learned scholar of the Tendai school and had been living in exile on Sado for some unknown reason. Reply to Sairenbo reveals that he converted to the Daishonin's teachings in the second month of 1272. The entity of the mystic law explains the great benefit of having faith in the Gohonzon, the object of devotion. When examined in terms of the concept of teaching, practice, and proof, this treatise corresponds to proof, while the opening of the eyes and the object of devotion for observing the mind are related to teaching and practice, respectively. Teaching means the Buddha's teaching, and practice means the practice that accords exactly with the teaching. Proof means the merit resulting from the practice of the teaching. Opening of the eyes establishes a fivefold comparison, which I reviewed 2 videos ago before we read on prayer. Fivefold comparison was one of the things I read from the dictionary. Opening of the eyes establishes a fivefold comparison, a system of comparative classification of all of Shakyamuni Buddha's teachings, and demonstrates the superiority of the Lotus Sutra over all other sutras. Ultimately, it clarifies the supremacy of Nam-myoho Renge-kyo because it's the latter day of the law. So every time I say Lotus Sutra, I'm really saying Nam-myoho Renge-kyo. Every time I say Nam-myoho Renge-kyo, I'm referring to something that had, until the latter day, been contained within the Lotus Sutra itself. Now that that latter day has come, the Lotus Sutra is even considered a provisional teaching. Don't forget, all of that was in on prayer. Okay, so we go on. Ultimately, it clarifies the supremacy of Nam-myoho Renge-kyo among all the Buddhist teachings. And accordingly, ultimately, it clarifies the supremacy of Nam-myoho Renge-kyo, the supremacy of Nam-myoho Renge-kyo among all the Buddhist teachings. Okay, so that's the whole point. Nam-myoho Renge-kyo is the tip of the spear. Okay, once you find Nam-myoho Renge-kyo, you don't have to go farther than that to find and discover the truth. What you have to do is discover the Nam-myoho Renge-kyo within you. And then it all clarifies itself accordingly in your own life, based on your own wisdom. You're manifesting Buddha wisdom, which means you're expressing your Buddhahood. Okay. Ultimately, it clarifies the supremacy of Nam-myoho Renge-kyo among all the Buddhist teachings, and accordingly, it corresponds to teaching. Object of devotion for observing the mind states that embracing faith in the Gohonzon is in itself enlightenment. Upholding the mystic law amounts to completing all the practices in which the Buddhas, plural, engaged and acquired all the benefits and virtues that they obtained through these practices. Therefore, it corresponds to practice. The entity of the mystic law corresponds to proof, because it reveals that by believing in the mystic law, one can manifest oneself as an entity of Myoho Renge-kyo. So when I first read this, because of my training from Mr. Matsuoka, I immediately understood the entity of the mystic law. The entity of the mystic law is Nichiren Daishonin. And that is how I read this. Hopefully, you'll be able to perceive the truth that this reading actually conveys the essence of your identity, and that you are also the entity of the mystic law. And how do you perceive that truth? Only because you have a relationship with the original teacher. But as an original disciple, as a bodhisattva of the earth, you have no separation between the original teacher. Whatever he is, you are as well. So the essence of the message of this is that we are all entities of the mystic law. All right? Okay, so entity of the mystic law, this Gosho corresponds to proof, because it reveals that by believing in the mystic law, one can manifest oneself as the entity of Myoho Renge-kyo. That's that oneness of that entity, okay? That it's the same in all things. It's the Nam-myoho Renge-kyo aspect of you as an entity, which is shared with everything else. There's a Nam-myoho Renge-kyo aspect to the planet Earth. There's a Nam-myoho Renge-kyo aspect to the environment and the plants and the insentient entities that exist in this Sahe world. The animals are living beings. We are living beings. There's all kinds of stuff that's all connected by virtue of the original state of Nam-myoho Renge-kyo being the source of all of it. Okay? And that's why we're able to kind of, understanding this teaching, go through sort of a process of shortcutting some of the necessary eons of practice that are contained within the Buddhism of the harvest of Shakyamuni from the former and the middle day. Continuing on the background on page 432. In this treatise, The Entity of the Mystic Law, Nichiren Daishonin uses the question and answer format to make his teaching more accessible to his contemporary and later followers. That's why it's such a groovy thing for us to read. It's very understandable if you open your mind. Its contents are divided into 6 parts. The first part teaches that the beings of the 10 worlds and their environments, that is, all things and phenomena in the universe, are entities of Myoho Renge-kyo. They're entities of Nam-myoho Renge-kyo. They're entities of the law. Concerning this view, a question is posed: if the entity of all living beings is the mystic law in its entirety, then are all the actions and the results that are associated with the 9 worlds, from the world of hell up to that of bodhisattvas, in effect entities of the mystic law? So all the bad stuff's also an element or an aspect of this entity of the mystic law, this original state? In reply to this question, the Daishonin states that just as the Buddha is the functioning of the mystic law, so likewise are the 9 worlds of illusion and suffering. This is explained. That's why no one is excluded from being able to advance through this teaching. No one. This is explained from the viewpoint of the defiled aspect, delusion, and the pure aspect, enlightenment or Buddhahood, both of which constitute the functioning of a single law, that is, the mystic law. The second part reveals from a more profound standpoint that actually only those who believe in the mystic law are entities of the mystic law, because only faith in the mystic law will allow you to manifest that essence of your life in your present form as Buddhahood, which is exactly what that state is. So he's saying basically, the second part reveals from a more profound standpoint that actually only people of faith that believe in the mystic law can be entities of the mystic law, can be considered entities of the mystic law. They're the only ones that have done the things necessary to manifest such a state. The Daishonin states then, the Buddha who is the entity of Myoho Renge-kyo, of the lifespan chapter of the essential teaching, which would be him, is to be found in the disciples and lay believers of Nichiren. Maybe that's because they're the same. In the third part, citing Tentai's profound meaning of the Lotus Sutra, the Daishonin discusses the lotus of the entity and also uses the lotus figuratively. The lotus flower was used as a metaphor to explain the lotus of the entity, since the entity of the law itself is difficult to understand. He clarifies the lotus of the entity that inherently exists and is not created. That's the original state. And identifies it as the supreme single law that simultaneously possesses both cause and effect. The law of the simultaneity of cause and effect is contained within Nam-myoho Renge-kyo. He also says that a sage perceived the reality of this law and named it Myoho Renge-kyo because he thought that it was closest to the lotus flower. This is what the lotus of the entity means. I'll say that again. He also says that a sage, which actually is perceived by me and perceived in this, and is pretty evident in this writing, that sage is him from a numberless major world systems, dust particle, kalpas, and beyond point, the original state, perceived the reality of this law and named it Myoho Renge-kyo. That's why it's Nichiren that has to make his advent to reveal it. This is what the lotus of the entity means. The lotus blooms and produces seeds at the same time, and so represents a simultaneity of cause and effect, which is the expression of the mystic law, the expression of Nam-myoho Renge-kyo. In the following three parts, the last three of the six, the treatise describes those who have become enlightened to the lotus of the entity. The fourth part reveals that Shakyamuni Buddha became enlightened to the lotus of the entity, numberless major world system dust particle kalpas in the past. Shakyamuni Buddha himself declared in the lifespan chapter of the Lotus Sutra, it has been immeasurable, boundless, hundreds, thousands, 10,000s, millions of nayutas of kalpas since I in fact attained Buddhahood. Next, in the fifth part, the treatise asserts that the passage in the Expedient Means chapter on the true aspect of all phenomena, which is another recent reading, which I think makes this Gosho a great one for us to share. Next, this treatise asserts that the passage in the Expedient Means chapter on the true aspect of all phenomena and the passage in the Supernatural Powers chapter on the transmission of the essence of the Lotus Sutra both contain perfect elucidations of the lotus of the entity. Then the treatise explains that the title, Myoho Renge-kyo itself, appearing at the beginning of each of the 28 chapters of the Lotus Sutra, represents the lotus of the entity, the original teacher. In response to the question regarding who was able to obtain the lotus of the entity during Shakyamuni Buddha's lifetime, the fifth part singles out those who received instruction from the Buddha of the lifespan chapter of the essential teaching. The Buddha of the lifespan chapter of the essential teaching is not necessarily Shakyamuni. That again means those who had received instruction from the original teacher. The sixth and last part clarifies who is able to obtain the lotus of the entity in the present latter day of the law. This part, I take that back. He's talking about Shakyamuni revealing numberless major world system, dust particle kalpas, In response to the question, I go back a bit, one full sentence. In the response to the question regarding who was able to obtain the lotus of the entity during Shakyamuni Buddha's lifetime, which would be the former and the middle day, the fifth part singles out those who received instruction from the Buddha of the lifespan chapter of the essential teaching. So those would be those people that were actually in the 16th chapter of the Lotus Sutra, listening to him preach for the first time that it had been numberless major world system, dust particle kalpas, because they all attained Buddhahood as a result of that declaration and understanding. The sixth and last part clarifies who is able to obtain the lotus of the entity in the present latter day of the law. This part also makes clear what law it is that enables the people of the latter day to realize the lotus of the entity and to attain Buddhahood. This part also makes clear what law it is that enables the people, everybody in existence of the latter day, to realize, to attain Buddhahood in their present form. Okay, is what that's talking about. To realize the lotus of the entity and attain Buddhahood. Because to realize the lotus of the entity is to realize the true nature of your own life. And to realize that is to realize that you're already the Buddha exactly as you are. Clarification of this point is found in the passage that states, but those who follow the teachings of Nichiren, he doesn't say, but those who follow the teachings of Shakyamuni, because he's talking to people in the latter day, okay, when it's time for Nam-myoho Renge-kyo to replace the 28th chapter Lotus Sutra as the prime object of devotion and manifest practice. But those who follow the teachings of Nichiren are able to gain the lotus of the entity and to manifest the mystic principle of the entity of the land of eternally tranquil light. What that means, but those who follow the teachings of Nichiren are able to attain Buddhahood in their present form and manifest the enlightened state that transforms their surroundings into the land of eternally tranquil light, regardless of anything else. They're in the 10th world. They're not in the, they're no longer limited to the 9 worlds, because if you can manifest the principle of the entity of the land of eternally tranquil light, you're the Buddha. Okay? So this is because they put their faith. Why were they able to do this in the latter day? Only because they put their faith in the golden words of the Buddha indicated in the lifespan chapter of the essential teaching and chant Nam-myoho Renge-kyo. So who is the Buddha indicated in the lifespan chapter of the essential teaching? It's the original teacher. It's the Nam-myoho Renge-kyo, thus come one. It's our master and mentor. Okay? We're the original disciples of that Buddha. Okay? That's why we're able to circumvent all the other shit that Shakyamuni had to teach everybody all over again in the former and the middle day to get them up to the point that they could hear the Lotus Sutra, 28 chapters of more very hard to understand stuff. Whereas we walk in and we say, hey, have you ever heard of Nam-myoho Renge-kyo? Can you say Nam? It's as simple as that. That's how we rediscover our original state. We don't go through voluminous years of study, eons of study. All right, so let me go back to it again. He says, again, but those who follow, the sixth and last part clarifies who is able to obtain the lotus of the entity in the present latter day of the law. And again, obtain the lotus of the entity is to obtain the original state of enlightenment. This part also makes clear what law it is that enables the people of the latter day to realize the lotus of the entity and to attain Buddhahood. Clarification of this point is found in the passage that states, but those who follow the teachings of Nichiren are able to gain the lotus of the entity and to manifest the mystic principle of the entity of the land of eternally tranquil light. This is because they put their faith in the golden words of the Buddha indicated in the lifespan chapter of the essential teaching and chant Nam-myoho Renge-kyo, because that Buddha says chant Nam-myoho Renge-kyo. Okay? The Buddha indicated in the lifespan chapter means the advocate of the teaching implicit in the depths of the lifespan chapter, which is Nichiren. That's where Nam-myoho Renge-kyo comes from, right? Implicit, hidden in the depths of the 16th chapter. He's the one that brings that forth in the latter day. Subsequently, this treatise explains why the mystic law was not propagated in the former and middle days. It identifies Nam-myoho Renge-kyo as the great pure law, as I've referred to it many times, that is to spread in the latter day. Nanye, which is the Japanese pronunciation or identification of Husu that I kept talking about, Tentai's teacher. Nanye was Tentai's teacher. Nanye and Tentai of China and Dingyo of Japan employed the recitation of Nam-myoho Renge-kyo as their private practice. I don't know how the Daishonin defines that. He doesn't qualify it, but if he says it, I'll believe it. But they did not spread this practice to other people. So he's saying this was not unknown. Nam-myoho Renge-kyo was not unknown to Nanye, Tentai, or Dingyo. Surely it couldn't have been unknown to Myolo either then. But they did not spread this practice to other people. The treatise sets forth two reasons for why they didn't tell anybody about Nam-myoho Renge-kyo. First of all, the proper time to do so had not yet arrived. It's for the latter day of the law, as it's described in the Lotus Sutra, because the pure law of the Lotus Sutra is going to become obscured and lost, and the great pure law is going to be revealed in that fifth 500-year period. So that's what they're saying. You can't do it during Shakyamuni's time because that's the former and the middle day. Okay? Second, or during Shakyamuni's time, or in those first 2,000 years thereafter. Second, he says, these men, Nanye, Tentai, Dingyo, were not the persons entrusted with the task of doing so. Only the original teacher can come back to teach the original teaching. Then, in conclusion, and it's his disciples that come and propagate it after he made his advent and left it for them to do so, to teach others. That's why we manifest Buddhahood in our present form exactly as he did and lead other people to do exactly that same thing exactly as he did. Then in conclusion, the Daishonin writes, it was for this reason that those such as Nanye, Tentai, and Dingyo, though in their hearts they clearly perceived the truth, left it to the leader and teacher of the latter day, left it to Nichiren to spread it widely, while they themselves refrained from doing so. Okay? So that's the background on the entity of mystic law from 431, 432, and 433. I'm going to now read the cover letter before I go to the beginning of the Gosho. Question: the lotus of the entity of the mystic law is difficult to understand, and therefore metaphor is used to make its meaning clear. But is there any example in the sutras to support such a practice? Answer: in other words, the lotus of the entity is discussed, but you're telling me that it's Nam-myoho Renge-kyo. Is there anything to actually back that up? Answer: the sutra says they are unspoiled by worldly things like the lotus flower in the water emerging from the earth. Here we see that the bodhisattvas of the earth are the lotus of the entity of the mystic law, and that the lotus is being used here as a simile. But I will write to you about this again at some future time. This teaching represents the ultimate principle of the entire Lotus Sutra. So what I'm going to read you is a teaching that he has shared with who did I say to? Sairenbo, okay, that is being declared here by Nichiren as the most important thing that's the ultimate, represents the ultimate principle of the entire Lotus Sutra. It's the most important thing as a teaching contained in that sutra. It is the ultimate purpose of the Thus Come One Shakyamuni's advent, which was to prep all this out so that we could go to the fifth 500-year period and Nam-myoho Renge-kyo would be able to be manifest by virtue of the teachings of the original teacher Nichiren. It says, again, it is the ultimate purpose of the Thus Come One Shakyamuni's advent, as well as the heart and core of the Lotus Sutra, which was entrusted to the great bodhisattvas who sprang out of the earth, led by superior practices, so that they might spread it widely in the latter day of the law. Those are the bodhisattvas of the earth. Only when, and there's no separation between the original teacher and the bodhisattvas of the earth. Only when the ruler of our nation has shown himself to have faith may this doctrine be revealed. But until then, it should remain a secret teaching. I, Nichiren, have just completed transmitting it to you, Sairenbo. Nichiren. Okay, that's the cover letter. So we go to the entity of mystic law, starting on page 417, and it starts out with a question. It's the entity of mystic law composed by Nichiren. This is an original composition. Question: what is the entity of Myoho Renge-kyo? Answer: all living beings and their environments in any of the 10 worlds are themselves entities of Myoho Renge-kyo. Question: if so, then is it possible to say that all living beings, such as ourselves, are entities of the mystic law in its entirety? Answer: of course. The sutra says this reality, the true aspect of all phenomena, consists of the appearance, nature, ... and their consistency from beginning to end. The great teacher Myolo comments on this as follows: the true aspect invariably manifests in all phenomena, and all phenomena invariably manifest in the 10 factors. The 10 factors invariably manifest in the 10 worlds, and the 10 worlds invariably manifest in life and its environment. Tantai commented, all phenomena consisting of the 10 factors, 10 worlds, and 3,000 realms are entities of the Lotus Sutra. The great teacher Nanye says, question: what does Myoho Renge-kyo represent? This is Tai's teacher. This is how far back that goes. The great teacher Nanye says, question: what does Myoho Renge-kyo represent? Answer: Myo indicates that all living beings are Myo, or mystic. Ho indicates that all living beings are Ho, or the law. All living beings are entities of the mystic law. Tantai also says, the law of all living beings is mystic. Means it's beyond your ability to comprehend. It's something that only in those that have become enlightened to it can truly perceive as a reality. Continuing second column, page 417. Question: if the entity of all living beings is the mystic law in its entirety, then are all the actions and their results that are associated with the 9 worlds, all the goop, from the world of hell up to that of Bodhisattva, in effect entities of the mystic law? Because that doesn't seem to make sense. Answer: the mystic principle that is the essential nature of phenomena possesses 2 aspects: the defiled aspect and the pure aspect. If the defiled aspect is operative, this is called delusion. If the pure aspect is operative, this is called enlightenment. This is the difference between the 9 worlds and the world of Buddhahood, the 10th world. They're all the same. Enlightenment, they're contained within one another is the point. There's no separation between them is the point. You have access to the 10th even if you're in the 9. Enlightenment constitutes the realm of Buddhahood. Delusion constitutes the realm of ordinary mortals. These 2 aspects, the deluded and the enlightened, are indeed 2 different phenomena, and yet both are workings of the one principle, that is, the essential nature of phenomena, or the true aspect of reality. They're both aspects of Nam-myoho Renge-kyo. It is like a piece of crystal. If the crystal is placed in the sun's rays, it will attract them and produce fire. But if it is placed in the moon's rays, it will produce water. The crystal is a single entity, but the effects it produces differ according to the circumstances. The mystic principle of the true aspect of reality is like this. The mystic principle of the true aspect of reality is one, But if it encounters evil influences, it will manifest delusion. While if it encounters good influences, it will manifest enlightenment. Enlightenment means enlightenment to the essential nature of phenomena, the true aspect of all phenomena. Enlightenment means enlightenment to the true aspect of all phenomena, to the essential nature of phenomena, and delusion, ignorance of it. So another way to say that is to say that enlightenment means enlightenment to Nam Myoho Renge Kyo, and delusion means being ignorant of it. That's what that just said. It is like the case of a person who in a dream sees himself performing various good and evil actions. After he wakes up and considers the matter, he realizes that it was all a dream produced by his own mind. This mind of his corresponds to the single principle of the essential nature of phenomena, to the original state, the true aspect of reality, while the good and evil that appeared in the dream correspond to enlightenment and delusion. When one becomes aware of this, it is clear that one should discard the ignorance associated with evil and delusion and take as one's basis the awakening that is characterized by goodness and enlightenment. Let me read that paragraph again. It is like the case of a person who in a dream sees himself performing various good and evil actions. After he wakes up and considers the matter, he realizes that it was all a dream produced by his own mind. This mind of his corresponds to the single principle of the essential nature of phenomena, the unchanging reality of Nam Myoho Renge Kyo, the true aspect of reality, while the good and evil that appeared in the dream correspond to enlightenment and delusion. It doesn't take away what the true aspect is. It just shows whether it's being manifest in its real state or whether it's being manifest in a diluted, convoluted, no longer pure state. When one becomes aware of this, it's all about where I'm coming from. It's all about my faith. It's not about how much I know. It's how sincerely I seek it. It's how sincerely I believe it and want to manifest it. Okay? When one becomes aware of this, and it is clear that one should discard the ignorance associated with evil and delusion, which do not perceive the true nature of my life, and take one as one's basis the awakening that is characterized by goodness and enlightenment to see the true nature of my life. Okay? So everybody, you understood that, right? The complete and final teaching on Perfect Enlightenment Sutra declares, the beginningless illusions and ignorance that beset all living beings are all produced by the perfectly enlightened mind of the thus come ones, plural, of the imperfectly enlightened mind of the Buddhas. The great teacher Tentai, in his great concentration and insight, states, ignorance or illusions are in themselves enlightenment to the essential nature of phenomena. Let me say that again because it's hard to get your head around what he means. The great teacher Tentai, in his great concentration and insight, which is his coup de grace, it's his ultimate teaching, all right, states, that's the Makashikan, states ignorance or illusions are in themselves enlightenment to the essential nature of phenomena. Because you're alive, you can perceive it, something, even if it's not correct, you are in the position to ascertain the correct. You just have to be able to be fortunate enough to have it be made available to you or be made aware of it. The fact that you're alive, if you're doing this funky stuff, you're in a position to become a Buddha. That's really the bottom line. The funky stuff doesn't preclude you from being a Buddha, and it doesn't preclude you from understanding Buddha wisdom. But you must manifest it. Okay, so the great teacher Tentai in the Makashikan states, ignorance or illusions are in themselves enlightenment to the essential nature of phenomena, but due to the influence of delusions, enlightenment changes into ignorance. The great teacher Myolo comments on this as follows, enlightenment has no separate entity. This is the whole key. Enlightenment has no separate entity, but completely depends upon ignorance. Are we born into the 10th world? No, we're born into the 9 worlds. We have to manifest the 10th world. That's through a process that expresses karma. But how are we born? We're born into the 9 worlds. So that's why enlightenment, there's no God element to this. That's pure and supreme and separate. There's an all-powerful reality that is the truth and is the essential nature of all things good and evil. But that's a whole different deal than a God component here. And that's what this is talking about. Enlightenment has no separate entity, but completely depends upon ignorance. And ignorance has no separate entity, but completely depends upon enlightenment. Because you can't manifest in the 9 worlds were it not for the original state. Do you understand? Mm-hmm. Your karmic influence as the temporary gathering of the 5 components is being played out in your existence, right. Okay? Manifests as a 9 world and you exit as a 10th world. Right. Okay? You attain Buddhahood in your present form. Ignorance is a state of delusion that must be cut off, whereas enlightenment is the state that one must manifest. So you're born with ignorance and have to cut it off. You have to bring forth the 10th world. That is there innately, but only comes forth if you manifest it. And how do you manifest it? By chanting Nam-myoho Renge-kyo, by studying the doctrine and the teaching, by influencing others to do the same, and by being a living example of the efficacy and the proof and the truth of what I just said. All right? That's becoming the Buddha in your present form. Ignorance is the state of delusion that must be cut off, whereas enlightenment is the state that one must manifest. How then can we say that they are a single entity? To resolve doubts on this point, one should have a clear grasp of the passages that have been quoted here. The example of the dream given in the 95th volume of the treatise on the great perfection of wisdom and the Tentai school's example of a piece of crystal cited above are very interesting illustrations. Further proof of the truth that ignorance and enlightenment are one in essence is found in the passage in the Lotus Sutra that reads, "These phenomena are part of an abiding law." These phenomena are part of an abiding law, and the characteristics of the world are constantly abiding. They're constantly reflecting it and manifesting that original nature which all things share, no matter what flavor they are, from 1 to 10. It's still life in this moment, okay? Great perfection of wisdom says enlightenment and ignorance are not different things, not separate things. To understand this is called the middle way. To understand this is what is called the middle way. There are many passages of proof asserting that the mystic principle of the true aspect of reality possesses 2 aspects, the defiled and the pure. But none can surpass the one in the Flower Garland Sutra that says, the mind, the Buddha, and all living things, these 3 things are without distinction. Or the passage in the Lotus Sutra that describes the true aspect of all phenomena, which goes into reciting the 10 factors that they consist from beginning to the consistency to the beginning of the end. The great teacher Nanye says the entity of the mind, Tentai's teacher Nanye, the great teacher Nanye says the entity of the mind is endowed with 2 aspects, the defiled and the pure. What's the entity of our mind? Nam-myoho Renge-kyo. What is the Daishonin just clarified? It contains both. It contains everything. So let me continue. The great teacher Nanye says the entity of the mind is endowed with 2 aspects, the defiled and the pure. However, it does not have 2 different forms, but is single in nature and without distinction. And the example of the mirror that he gives truly represents a thorough explanation of the subject. For a more detailed understanding, one may also refer to his interpretations in the Mahayana method of concentration and insight. And these are annotated number 9 and number 10, and I'm going to go back and read them because the example of the mirror I don't want to freelance on. Okay, so number 9 is saying that quotation comes from the Mahayana method of concentration and insight, which is the Makashikan. And then the example of the mirror is expounded in the Mahayana method of concentration and insight, which was previously cited. Through the example of the inseparable relationship between an object and its image reflected in the mirror, Nanya reveals that a living being and a Buddha are two, but not two in essence. In other words, common mortals of the 9 worlds are inherently endowed with Buddhahood. And with the example of the mirror, what they talk about is the fact that if you look at the back of the mirror, you don't see yourself as in the true aspect. Okay? You're looking at the back of the mirror. You don't perceive the Nam-myoho Renge-kyo. Looking in the mirror, from the front of the mirror, is seeing the true aspect of you. And you've been the same entity no matter what angle you viewed the mirror from. But it's not until you got in front of it and saw it in its true aspect that you were able to reflect and perceive your own. That's what that's about. So let me go back. The great teacher Nanya says the entity of the mind is endowed with 2 aspects, the defiled and the pure. However, it does not have 2 different forms, but is single in nature and without distinction. And the example of the mirror that he gives truly presents a thorough explanation of the subject. For a more detailed understanding, one may also refer to his interpretations in the Mahayana method of concentration and insight. Another good explanation at the bottom of page 418 in the second column. Another good explanation is given in the 6th volume of Myolo's Annotations on the Profound Meaning of the Lotus Sutra. That's his commentary on Tentai's work, Profound Meaning, that was actually conveyed by Chang'an. In the passage that reads, while the 3,000 realms remain latent in ordinary beings, remain latent, not absent, surely, but latent, okay, which means they're there, but they're not there. They're not accessible. While the 3,000 realms remain latent in ordinary beings, they are all designated by the term ignorance, okay? Until you can bring them forth, ignorance is what's keeping you from being able to bring them forth, okay? Again, another good example is given in the 6th volume of Myolo's Annotations on the Profound Meaning of the Lotus Sutra, in the passage that reads, while the 3,000 realms remain latent in ordinary beings, they are all designated by the term ignorance. While they remain latent, they're defined as ignorance. But when the 3,000 realms all manifest themselves as the result of Buddhahood, because that's what was necessary for 3,000 realms to exist, you had to include Buddhahood in that 10 times 10 times 10 times 3, right?
Yes.
Okay. So when the 3,000 realms all manifest themselves as the result of Buddhahood, when you awaken to the original state, to your true identity, then they are all designated by the term eternal happiness. So all of your ignorance and suffering suddenly takes on a new meaning because it all led you to that moment when finally the light went on and you understood who you really are, and you left the 9 worlds and started to include the 10th always to be there as a living entity in the 9. However, because at the very top of page 419, however, where are we at on time?
43.
Okay. However, because the 3,000 realms themselves remain unchanged, ignorance is essentially one with enlightenment. Do you understand? Even though he said it was kind of theoretical, they are still there because they're ready to become actual the moment you become actual instead of theoretical Ichinen Sanzen, actual Ichinen Sanzen. However, because the 3,000 realms themselves remain unchanged, ignorance is essentially one with enlightenment. Since the 3,000 realms all remain constant, they possess both entity and function. This commentary makes the matter perfectly clear. Question: if all living beings, because you just said, since all 3,000 realms all remain constant, even in the deluded state or in the enlightened state, they all possess both entity and function. They all possess reality and what you're going through. This commentary makes the matter perfectly clear. Question: if all living beings are entities of Myoho Renge-kyo, are all entities of the mystic law, are all entities of the law of Nam-myoho Renge-kyo, then are ordinary people like ourselves who are ignorant and deluded, unenlightened and dull-witted, also entities of the mystic law? Answer: though there are a great many people in the world today, they all fall into two categories. Those who believe in the provisional teachings and those who believe in the true teaching. Delusion and enlightenment. Once again, those who believe in the provisional and expedient teachings, such as the Nimbutsu, cannot be called entities of Myoho Renge-kyo. Their slander precludes that. But those who believe in the Lotus Sutra, which is the true teaching, are entities of Myoho Renge-kyo, mystic entities of the true aspect of reality, regardless of how they've manifested the state that they're in this moment. The Nirvana Sutra says, among all living beings, those who believe in the Mahayana are called the Mahayana people. The great teacher Nanye in his Four Peaceful Practices writes, the Great Diligence Sutra says, and again, Nanye is Chintai's teacher, the Great Diligence Sutra says, ordinary beings and the thus come one share a single Dharma body. This is real important for you to understand. The Great Diligence Sutra says, ordinary beings and the thus come one share a single Dharma body. It's the same body. Okay? The ordinary beings and the thus come one are one.
Yes.
Okay? They share the single Dharma body. That's all, okay? Being pure and mystic beyond comparison, it is called Myoho Renge-kyo, the original state. All right? He also says, those who practice the Lotus Sutra are pursuing this single act of devotion. He also says, those who practice the Lotus Sutra are pursuing through this single act of devotion the mind that is endowed with all manner of fortunate results. These are present simultaneously and not acquired gradually over a long period of time. This is like the blossom of the lotus that when it opens already possesses a large number of seeds. Hence, such persons are called people of the one vehicle. He also says the people of the two vehicles, particularly the voice hearers and the bodhisattvas of inferior capacity, choose to follow the way of expedient means, practicing methods that assure gradual progress over a long period of time. But the bodhisattvas of superior capacity honestly discard expedient means and do not carry out the practice of gradual progress. If they are able to complete the meditation based on the Lotus Sutra, then they will thereby possess all manner of fortunate results. Persons such as these are called the people of the one vehicle. Do you understand? What are people of the one vehicle? All people that are going to manifest Buddhahood in their present form. They're all the original disciples of the original teacher. That's what he's just talking about. We chant Nam-myoho Renge-kyo. We don't refer to any of this stuff. We don't go back to what Nanye said. But Nanye predicted all this. Nanye laid it all out. This is the same teaching from Nanye, Tentai, Chang'an, Myolo, Dengyo, and now we're in the latter day, Nichiren. Nichiren's the original teacher that all of this teaching is based on. All of this teaching is based on the original teaching of Nam-myoho Renge-kyo. Get it? Yes. So look, this is a long paragraph. I got to reread it for clarity. And maybe I'll skip or whatever. Okay, I got a ways to go here. The great teacher Nanye in his Four Peaceful Practices, the first column on page 419, right in the middle. And I'll go ahead and go to the question and answer again. He's trying to figure out how can common mortals really also be Buddhists. That's what you're basically saying, all right? Question, if all living beings are entities of Myoho Renge-kyo, then are ordinary people like ourselves who are ignorant and deluded, unenlightened and dull-witted, also entities of the mystic law? Answer, though there are a great, yes, if you're embracing the correct teaching, Okay, if you're embracing the lotus, if you're embracing the other things, no.
Right.
All right, that's the answer. Now I'll go back and this is the answer. Though there are a great many people in the world today, they all fall into two categories, yes or no. Those who believe in the provisional teachings and those who believe in the true teaching. And don't forget, in the latter day of the law, even the Lotus Sutra is a provisional teaching because we're only supposed to be practicing and teaching the teaching of the original teacher, the teaching of the Buddhism of sowing. Okay? And the Lotus Sutra contains both harvest and sowing. Okay? Or pardon me, not sowing, harvest only. Though there are a great many people in the world today, they all fall into two categories. Those who believe in the provisional teachings and those who believe in the true teaching. Those who believe in the provisional teaching and expedient teaching, such as the Nimbutsu, cannot be called entities of Myoho Renge-kyo. But those who believe in the Lotus Sutra, which is the true teaching, are entities of Myoho Renge-kyo. Entities of the true aspect of reality. The Nirvana Sutra says, among all living beings, those who believe in the Mahayana are called the Mahayana people. The great teacher Ananya in his Four Peaceful Practices writes, the Great Diligent Sutra says, ordinary beings and the thus come one share a single Dharma body. Being pure and mystic and beyond comparison, it is called Myoho Renge-kyo. He also says, those who practice the Lotus Sutra are pursuing through this single act of devotion the mind that is endowed with all manner of fortunate results. Benefits, the benefit of Buddhahood. They are present simultaneously. They are present simultaneously and are not acquired gradually over a long period of time. Now, what is that saying then? What is the point of that comment? The benefit of the original, of being enlightened to the original state is already contained in your life, just like the 10th world. But you're not able to uncap it or uncork it until the original teaching, the correct teaching that allows it to manifest as such, becomes available to you and you take the actions necessary to utilize it. Okay? So those who practice the Lotus Sutra are doing that then, and are pursuing through this single act of devotion the mind that is endowed with all manner of fortunate results. The mind that would normally take through the other manner of obtaining eons. If you're going to do it through the teachings of the former and the middle day, the Buddhism of harvest, it takes multiple lifetimes. The teaching of Nichiren says you can do it in your present form. Right. All of the benefits that you would have accrued through all the actions of multiple lifetimes are there from the very beginning of chanting. You don't have to go through a process of catching up with all good deeds. Do you understand? The good deeds are revealed by the fact that you became the Buddha in your present form. Do you know what the odds of that are? It's impossible in the Buddhism of the harvest. All right, so that's what it's trying to say. These are present simultaneously and are not acquired gradually over a long period of time. This is like the blossom of the lotus that when it opens already possesses a number of seeds. The original state is what's revealed. Nam-myoho Renge-kyo is what's revealed. All manner of benefits already simultaneous with that. All right? Hence, such persons are called the people of the one vehicle. We're Buddhas. He also says the people of the two vehicles, particularly the voice hearers and bodhisattvas of inferior capacity, choose to follow the way of expedient means, practicing methods that assure gradual progress over a long period of time. But the bodhisattvas of superior capacity, which would be bodhisattvas of the original state, the bodhisattvas of the earth, honestly discard expedient means. We say bullshit to all that stuff. We just want to chant and get to it. And do not carry out the practice of gradual progress. We attain Buddhahood in our present form in a single lifetime. Yes. If they're able to complete the meditation based on the Lotus Sutra, if they're able to complete their practice and get to that point of the epiphany of perception, then they will thereby possess all manner of fortunate results. Boom, just by having made that cause in that single lifetime. They'll get the equivalency of all kinds of eons of effort. Persons such as these are called people of the one vehicle. Okay? He said the one, Here, persons such as the people called people of the one vehicle. Here, these people also are people of the one vehicle. Do you get it? The phrase practice of gradually progress, the phrase practice of gradual progress on 419 second column that appears in this commentary by Nanye has been interpreted by the scholars of our time to refer to the specific teaching. In fact, however, it refers to the way of expedient means as opposed to the way of the Lotus Sutra, which is endowed simultaneously with causes and results. Simultaneously endowed. Hence, the term practice of gradual progress indicates the perfect teaching preached before the Lotus Sutra. It's the Buddhism of harvest. The various Mahayana sutras preached before the Lotus Sutra, and the Mahayana and Hinayana sutras that belong to the sudden and gradual teachings. As proof, we may cite the following passage in the Immeasurable Meaning Sutra. Then I preached the 12 divisions of the correct and equal sutras, and the teachings of great wisdom, and the flower garland teaching of the ocean imprint meditation, describing the many kalpas of practice for bodhisattvas. Okay, that's from the Immeasurable Meaning Sutra, which is the sutra that precedes the Lotus Sutra. All right, when he's qualifying everything, now I'm about to reveal the truth, okay? But the bodhisattvas of superior capacity, which are again the bodhisattvas of the earth because they make their advent in the latter day when Nam-myoho Renge-kyo exists. They didn't make their advent anytime prior to the ceremony in the air of the Lotus Sutra. They immediately split as soon as they cap the essential teaching of the original state, and they split again. They're not even there for the last 5 or 6 or 7 chapters, 6 chapters. But the bodhisattvas of superior capacity honestly discard expedient means, and do not carry out the practice of gradual progress that's described in the other teaching. Do you understand? Of Shakyamuni's Buddhism of the harvest. They practice the Lotus Sutra, and when they attain its truth, they simultaneously acquire all manner of fortunate results. Persons such as these are called the people of the one vehicle. When we consider the meaning of these various passages, we understand that none of the ordinary people, here we go, when we consider the meaning of these various passages that precede what I'm talking about to Yusai Renbo as Nichiren on Sado, when we consider the meaning of these various passages from the sutras, we understand that none of the ordinary people and sages of the 3 vehicles, the 5 vehicles, the 7 expedient means, the 9 worlds, or the 4 flavors and 3 teachings can be called Mahayana followers who are entities of Myoho Renge-kyo. Why? Though they are Buddhas in these teachings, they are Buddhas of the provisional teachings and cannot be called Buddhas in the true sense. This is because the Buddhas of the provisional teachings in their 3 bodies have not yet freed themselves from impermanence. Then how could beings in other realms other than Buddhahood be called entities of Myoho Renge-kyo? That is why it is said that a person of humble station, born in the latter day of the law, is more worthy of respect than the kings and high ministers who lived during the 2,000 years of the former and the middle days when Nam-myoho Renge-kyo had not yet been revealed. You understand? Okay, so Nanye says in his commentary, all living beings have within themselves the storehouse of the Dharma body, and therefore they are in no way different from the Buddha, which is the truth. Delusion versus enlightenment. We've already expressed that. That is why the Lotus Sutra says the pure and ordinary eyes, ears, nose, tongue, body, and mind that one received at birth from one's father and mother are also like this. Nanye also writes, question, again, Buddha and the components of the 9 worlds that you're born into, there is no separation. They are exactly the same in essence. Nanye also writes, question, in what sutra does the Buddha explain the eyes and other sense organs and designate them by the name thus come one? Answer, the Great Diligent Sutra says, ordinary beings and the thus come one share a single Dharma body. Being pure and mystic beyond comparison, it is called Myoho Renge-kyo. This comes from a sutra other than the Lotus, but since the Lotus Sutra clarified the same point, it is all right to quote it here. If we take up the word share that is used in this passage of the Great Diligent Sutra and apply it to our argument, we may say that those who share in and believe in the Lotus Sutra are entities of that mystic sutra. But those who do not share in it, such as the Nembutsu believers, are not entities of the Mystic Sutra because they have already turned their backs on their Buddha nature. That is the thus come one of the Dharma body. In essence, the entity of Myoho Renge-kyo. In essence, the title of this writing is The Entity of the Mystic Law. The entity, which is Myoho Renge-kyo, right now Myoho Renge-kyo. The essence of the entity of Myoho Renge-kyo is the physical body that the disciples and followers of Nichiren who believe in the Lotus Sutra received from their fathers and mothers at birth. And that karmic destiny was already handled. What causes we make in this lifetime will manifest in the next. This lifetime, we're manifesting effects from the past. Okay, so in essence, the entity of the Myoho Renge-kyo is the physical body that the disciples and followers of Nichiren who believe in the Lotus Sutra received from their fathers and mothers at birth. Such persons who honestly discard expedient means, put faith in the Lotus Sutra alone, and chant Nam-myoho Renge-kyo will transform the three paths of earthly desires, karma, and suffering into the three virtues of Dharma body, wisdom, and emancipation. The threefold contemplation and the three truths will immediately become manifest in their minds, and the place where they live will become the land of the eternally tranquil light. The Buddha, who is the entity of Myoho Renge-kyo of the lifespan chapter of the essential teaching, who is both inhabiting subject and inhabited realm, life and environment, body and mind, entity and function, the Buddha eternally endowed with the three bodies, is to be found in the disciples and lay believers of Nichiren. Such persons embody the true entity of Myoho Renge-kyo, that is, all due to the meritorious workings of the spontaneous transcendental powers inherent in it display. Could anyone venture to doubt it? Indeed, it cannot be doubted. Okay? Now, I don't know if you followed that, but that was really, really heavy stuff. I'm going to go back and reread that paragraph. Says it all. The Daishonin is saying to Sairenbo, after he's given him all the preamble I've already read, in essence, the entity of Myoho Renge-kyo is the physical body that you and I both possess, Sairenbo, that we received from our mothers and fathers in birth. And those of us that honestly discard the expedient means of the entire teaching and put our faith in the entirety of Shakyamuni's teachings and put faith in the Lotus Sutra alone, the teaching that he said is the essence and the ultimate teaching that he has not revealed yet, and chant Nam-myoho Renge-kyo, which I have qualified as the original teacher by coming back and manifesting it as the entity of that mystic law that is referred to here. Okay, so such persons who honestly discard expedient means, put faith in the Lotus Sutra alone, and chant Nam-myoho Renge-kyo will transform the three paths of earthly desires, karma, and suffering. Okay, will transform the elements of the 9 worlds that we've lived with in agony because we had no solution or capacity to perceive the true aspect and how we could change that, or why is that happening. That will transform into the 3 virtues of the Dharma body, wisdom, and emancipation. In other words, without your earthly desires, karma, and sufferings that get transformed, you would never be able to have come forth in your lifetime as the Buddha, the Dharma body, wisdom, and emancipation. Emancipation means complete freedom, right? The threefold contemplation and the three truths will immediately become manifest in their minds, and the place where they live will become the land of eternally tranquil light. In essence, that's saying they will be able to perceive the true reality of all things based on the enlightenment that becomes manifest when earthly desires, karma, and suffering are transformed into Dharma, body, wisdom, and emancipation. Their thinking will automatically know all the things that you would otherwise have to study and try and figure out. All right? Okay. The Buddha, okay, the threefold contemplation, okay, what's the threefold contemplation? That's the Makashikan kind of thing that is the teaching that's preceding this. This is how you attain Buddhahood through in the former or the middle day based on the teachings of Nanye, Tentai, and so forth through meditation rather than recitation. Nichiren saying chant Nam-myoho Renge-kyo. Tentai doesn't say anything about chanting anything.
Right.
Nobody else says anything about chanting anything other than the teachings of Amida by whatever. Okay, so the threefold contemplation and the three truths. What are the three truths? Temporary existence, non-substantiality, temporary existence, and the truth of the middle way. The truth of the middle way is that we're not just something that's only here for a short time and disappear forever, and we're not something that stays whole in a different state forever. Okay, we're a temporary gathering of the five components.
Yes.
Okay, so the threefold contemplation and the three truths will immediately become manifest in their minds. In other words, that will no longer be hard to understand, and it's not. Okay, because faith says that's now I see how it can all come together. If you're reading this with the desire to perceive it correctly, you can see it all makes sense, but it's all to the benefit of Nichiren's teaching. If you're a believer in Nichiren's teaching, then the answer that manifests in your own mind shows you Nichiren's teaching is absolutely correct and clear in its understanding of the correct answer.
Right.
Okay? Which in the Great Collection Sutra, Shakyamuni has already said will become obscured and lost in the fifth 500-year period. Nichiren's the one that's here to clarify it. Let me go to next to the question. Let me just read this paragraph again then. All right. The threefold, okay. Such persons who honestly discard expedient means, they don't listen to the other sutras after Shakyamuni said, disregard everything I've said, and now I'm about to reveal the truth. So only put your faith in the perfect teaching. Okay? Put faith in the Lotus Sutra alone.
Right.
Chant Nam-myoho Renge-kyo, which means now now you must be a disciple of Nichiren, because there's nothing about that in the teachings of Shakyamuni.
Right.
That by doing that, you will transform the three paths of earthly desires, karma, and suffering, the things that make you a common mortal. You will transform those into the three virtues of Dharma, body, wisdom, and emancipation, the things that make you a Buddha in your present form, exactly as you are. The threefold contemplation and the three truths will immediately become manifest in your minds. In other words, when you attain Buddhahood, none of this is confusing anymore. None of this is unknown to you anymore, frankly speaking, okay? And you will have studied something prior to getting to that point, right? So that when you get to that point, now suddenly the teaching is no longer confusing or a mystery. You understand a manner in which to actually not only perceive it for yourself, but a manner in which to convey it to other people.
Right. Help
Help them understand it, okay? So it will immediately become manifest in their minds. That's the original state. That's original enlightenment. And the place where they live, their environment will no longer be seen in the nine realm aspect, but will manifest the enlightened aspect of the land of eternally tranquil light. You no longer look at this as a bunch of place just for suffering. Yeah, you have difficulties, but it's not the same thing. It's not the suffering of no solution. It's the suffering, it's not a suffering. Do you understand? When you're living in the land of eternally tranquil light, your faith precludes that. You perceive all the things that are obstacles as opportunities to manifest the power of the law and to prove it to other people for their sake and to fulfill your vow, right? He says the Buddha who is the entity of Myoho Renge-kyo, of the lifespan chapter of the essential teaching, who is both inhabiting subject and inhabited realm. So what would that mean, though? The Buddha who is one with the enlightened state of all things. Inhabiting subject, flowers, trees, whatever. Inhabited realm. The realm would be the realm of the earth, right? The environment itself. Life in the environment. These go, okay. The Buddha who is the entity of Myoho Renge-kyo. He's trying to describe him, the original state, which he is one with. There's no difference between him and the original state, right? It's because of that fact that when we become one, we also become one equal with him and the original state. We also become the law of Nam-myoho Renge-kyo as well as the person of the Buddha. Do you understand?
Right.
All right. The Buddha, who is the entity of Myoho Renge-kyo, of the lifespan chapter of the essential teaching, which is the one hidden in the depths, not the one on the surface.
Right.
All right? It's the Buddhism of sowing, not the Buddhism of harvest, which is actually what's being taught in the 16th chapter on the surface. All right? Who is both, this Buddha, he's saying, who is both the inhabiting subject and the inhabited realm, who is both life. This Buddha is both life and the environment. This Buddha who is both body and mind. This Buddha who is both entity and function. The Buddha eternally endowed with the three bodies, the Buddha of the original state, the Buddha that is the original teacher. Right. Do you understand? The Buddha that we manifest our sameness with based on Nam-myoho Renge-kyo, and then manifest the sameness of life function.
There's no separation. Okay?
He is to be found in the disciples and lay believers of Nichiren, not the disciples and lay believers of Shakyamuni. So if he is to be found in the disciples and lay believers of Nichiren, it's Nichiren. That's my point. If you're going to find me, my essence, I'm linked to this guy.
Right.
Okay, period. Straight up.
Right.
Okay, no connection to anybody else.
Right.
I know that for sure. That's my conviction. He says, such persons as this are, such persons embody the true entity. They embody the sameness as Nichiren. They embody the original state. They embody the original teacher. They embody original wisdom.
Yes.
Okay? They are equal to, not less than. Such persons embody the true entity of Myoho Renge-kyo. This is all due to the meritorious workings that the spontaneous transcendental powers inherent in it display. The inherent transcendental powers of Nam-myoho Renge-kyo. Could anyone venture to doubt it? Indeed, it cannot be doubted, because he says this is the absolute truth. And when he said in the cover letter, this is the essence of the entirety of my teaching, somewhere where I just said that, yeah, that means the advocate of the teaching of... I already read it to you here. Okay, so you can stop there. We're on page 420 and I'll continue.